This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
We work outside and it is not fun. Um, so you need something that motivates you to go home and to enjoy. And if you find that and you bring it up in conversation at work, you're not working. You're just enjoying the day, and we're here for 10 hours and it's just 10 hours. And you don't see it as work anymore. And that's what I found has been the best leadership style for me, is just being personable with my employees and understanding them and letting them understand me, sharing my failures or sharing what I'm doing so that they feel like they're part of it, not just a number, an employee number that punches the clock and gets paid.
This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand on a mission to deliver premium, fresh roasted coffee while making a positive impact in the world. Their motto is drink coffee and do good, which reflects their commitment to making amazing coffee and actively supporting the military community. 10% of every order goes to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, an organization dedicated to helping sailors, Marines, and their families in times of need. All our listeners get 10% off every order of their amazing coffee by using the discount code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at saltysailorcoffee.com. Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Shay Brickhouse. Shay heads up Landscaping Unlimited, a complete landscaping and hardscaping company based in Eastern North Carolina. He took over this business in 2016 and has been leading in the trenches ever since. A good friend of mine, who is a former Navy veteran, worked for Shay and called him the best leader he has ever worked for, which includes all the leaders that he had when he was in the Navy. Now, I don't hear that very often, so I immediately contacted Shay to see if he'd come on the show so we could learn from his leadership journey and how he became a leader worth following. So, Shay, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, it is great to meet you, and it's great to hear. Again, it's very unusual. I hear stories of great bosses, so I wanted to have you on the show to hear your story. But first of all, could you tell us how you ended up leading Landscaping Unlimited?
Yeah, be glad to. I think I got to give you a little bit of a backstory on our business so you fully understand it. My father started this business in '89 and left his job, started with nothing. And my mom was managing Hardee's. Basically, they were taking her paycheck, paying the payroll of the landscaping business until they got it all going. Later on in life, my father got diagnosed with cancer, and as I was going through high school, wasn't really sure how all that was going to go. Diagnosed was pretty severe, and wasn't sure if I left for college, would I be around when he passed away, or needed me to take over the business. So I kind of stayed back at home, went to a local college, and once he passed away, I kind of had to do a lot of growing up and made a lot of failures and a lot of mistakes along the road. But that's how I got into what I'm doing today. Kind of took over the family business due to my father passing away, and it's not the way I wanted to do it, but it's the way that it came out.
What's interesting about your story, and that's why I wanted you to share with it, is that it wasn't that your dad mentored you for years to take over this position. It was, he passed away and you were sort of thrust into the family business to be in a leadership position. So, and that's very common in oftentimes in leaders. They get promoted before they're ready. So they get this opportunity to be a leader. They get promoted. Next thing you know, you're in this job, you're a leader. Everyone's looking at you. What was that like for you in those early days when you were taking over the business, trying to fill your dad's shoes? You're new to that leadership position. What were some of the challenges that you faced in those early days?
One, I was young. Um, a lot of people don't want to follow someone who is young. I was 19 years old, 20 years old, trying to do something that my dad was doing, who was in his 40s, had everyone's respect, and I didn't have that. So from the customers, it was hard to get them on board with me doing something that a company that's been around for a while has been doing. And it was hard to get the employees to respect what I said. And I did a lot of failure on the employee side because I thought I had to drill it into them, and I've realized that that wasn't the case. I just had to respect them, and they would respect me.
So what were some of the other mistakes that you made in those early days? I think you're right. We tend to, when we get in these positions, we sort of become like we pretend to be a leader, like we pretend to be a manager. We do what we think a manager does, which, like you said, you tear into people, you chew them out. What were some of the mistakes you made, and when did you start realizing that there might be a different way to lead your team?
So, you see failure in many ways. You either see it in like someone's morale, and I saw that a lot through our company. I would see mistakes made, and instead of trying to figure out a good way to correct them, I would just drill right into them, and then I would see the morale kind of breaking through the company, and I was like, I just created that problem. Maybe it wasn't a big issue. Maybe I need to sit back and look at that a little more. And then you also see failure on the finance side. So, then you start asking yourself, like, why are we failing financially? Then you have to look at, well, is it your leadership style or is it just something changing in the economy? Um, some of the stuff, I found was my leadership style, which was very much I'm going to run a tight ship and I'm going to micromanage and I don't want to see it done my way or you're going to see the highway. Um, didn't really see that as a good leadership style, but that's one that I kind of saw growing up and found out real quickly it wasn't for me. It might have worked for somebody else, but it didn't work for me.
How much did you had some big life changes? You were young, then you got married, had children. How much did having getting married, having children, having people depending on you, like in your family, did that change your perspective on leadership and your perspective of your role in the business?
It changed everything for me. Um, I went from I I lived this company. If I was awake, I was working. Um, the weekends I would kind of spend some time to myself, but I literally lived landscaping unlimited. So when I got married, some of that changed because I had to really devote some time to my wife. I seen some failure in there that I wasn't really giving her the attention she needed as a marriage should. I was giving it to my company. When I had kids, I started noticing the same thing. I was trying to do some traveling work, and I saw that my family was breaking down. So it changed my whole style of working and leading because my family taught me patience and taught me that, if I'm not happy at home, it doesn't matter how hard I work. If I don't have anything worth, coming back to home and having it to spend with them, it doesn't matter what my successes are if I fail here. So I had to really become grounded at home so that I could make work grow.
Interesting, because we do talk about that a lot in the show. That if you don't, lead yourself first and take care of your family, right? Then I always say I have a friend of mine who talks about a leader is like some being on stage, right? And so you have to be ready to be perform on stage. But if behind the stage is a complete mess, you're
Yeah.
not completely 100% dedicated to your job because you're worried about what's happening behind the stage. And so one of the interesting lessons you learned was like you got to balance that correctly, and it doesn't matter, like you said, if you're super successful in your business but have nothing to come home to, that's a failure, right? And that's not a success either.
Yeah.
One of the things that gets me, in terms of like hearing your story, you're young, you take over this business, your father ran it, he started it, and so you had to learn leadership while you were doing it. So it's like you're learning how to fly the plane while it's going down the runway, and well, but did you have any leadership influences? In other words, was there someone in your life that demonstrated what a good leader was, that sort of helped you understand, like, okay, there's a standard for leadership that's maybe different than command and control and micromanagement? Did you find, was there some influence in your life that kind of helped you understand leadership better?
Yes, sir. I'm a very like visual guy. if I see things, then I kind of learn it that way. You can I can read it in a book all day long, but it doesn't really resonate with me. So obs- observing people through high school, um, teachers, I see how people like my teachers would teach me in high school, and I would say like, you're drilling me as the textbook, but you're not showing me. So I have certain teachers that showed me what I wanted to be as a leader, and then I had teachers that I would look at and I'd go, all right, I know I don't want to be like you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
on the business side, I grew up riding shotgun with my dad on these job sites. Every summer I kind of lived with him, um, on and off the job. So I watched a lot of what he did. So my father is probably my biggest influence. And then right after that, you've got my mother. I mean, she runs a hardware store, and she's behind the scene making all the stuff happen that you don't see. So I've seen her leadership style, and hers is different than my dad's. They two totally different ways, but they both work for them. And Gerald Wilson was a fellow that was my dad's best friend. I called him uncle. I spent a lot of time riding in his shotgun seat on and off job sites as he worked for our company. And, I saw his leadership style, and I saw how he could get things done that maybe my dad couldn't, or maybe my mom couldn't. So it was a big blend of everyone's style. And then you've got my older brother that I look up to a lot. Um, I always wanted to, since my dad passed away, I always wanted to prove my brother that, I could be who I needed to be for the family business. So I looked at how he leads his business, or that the business he runs, and I'll have them to thank for what I have now to keep me on the right path. And it's
That's
gonna
that's that's really interesting. And again, what I hear, and this is what I've heard from a lot of people, is that we learn leadership through others, and we learn what to do and also what not to do. But one of the interesting things is that you had to find your own leadership style. In other words, you weren't your dad, you weren't your mom, you weren't your brother. So how did you go about discovering what worked for you? How did you find your personal leadership style?
so I'm a landscape contractor. I go to seminars and stuff to keep my continuing credits. And in all those continuing credit classes, there's always someone tells you how to be a better leader, and they tell you like what they did for their business and yada yada yada. I would take notes in those classes, and I would come back home and like ask myself like, all right, I need to do it this way. Well, I very quickly come to find out that that wasn't for me. It wasn't a leadership style tailored to me. It was tailored to them. So I had to ask myself like, all right, how do I want my business to run, and how do I want my employees to think of me? And by doing that, I found myself, found out who I was, found out who I wanted to be. I became the leader that I wanted to follow. Because if I wasn't going to follow myself, why would anybody else follow me? And by doing that, I found out that I just have to understand my employees, and each one of them is different. Each one of them has their own thing that drives them, whether it's stuff that's extracurricular as far as drag racing or photography, or just anything that gets them going. You got to find a way to motivate them through work, because we work outside and it is not fun. Um, so you need something that motivates you to go home and to enjoy. And if you find that and you bring it up in conversation at work, you're not working. You're just enjoying the day, and we're here for 10 hours, and it's just 10 hours, and you don't see it as work anymore. And that's what I found has been the best leadership style for me, is just being personable with my employees, and understanding them, and letting them understand me, sharing my failures or sharing what I'm doing, so that they feel like they're part of it, not just a number, an employee number that punches the clock and gets paid.
Really interesting. You know, Truett Cathy, who founded Chick-fil-A, he said, "We're not in the chicken business. We're in the people business." And I say in my books that leadership is a people business. It's all about people, and that's 30 years of me in the trenches figuring that out. And you've done it as a young leader. You figured out that people make the company. People, and you've said something that's really powerful, and I hope listeners you heard that, is that each person is different and you have to have a relationship with those people, and you can't lead people you don't know. And I think that's a key lesson that makes an effective leader, is that you get to know your people and you get to know what their hopes, their desires, what they love. And so I love hearing that, because that's what I learned as well too. And I learned that, locked in a metal submarine for months at a time. Like you lead people, whether you're out, in the hot Eastern North Carolina summer, or you're locked in a metal tube. It's about people, it's about relationships, and that doesn't change. So it's interesting that you found the same answers that I found in a completely different way. So it's interesting to hear that.
Yep.
What would you I mean, how, if someone said to you, describe your leadership style, what would it be? How would you describe that leadership style?
Um, I used to say I kind of like micromanaged everything, and I was very much like, you have to do it this way, and I would almost make it where you couldn't do it. I had to do it. Um, right now, though, it's very much more laid back and loose. I'm showing my guys what I know, and I'm teaching them hands on. Um, so I'm not just throwing them out there to the wolves. I'm out there with them. I'm working with them. I'm showing them our craft, because at the end of the day, we want to have the same product, which is satisfied in customers. We want to make sure they're happy. So I'm much more laid back. I'm hands on with them. I'm communicating with them, and I'm giving them room to grow. I've found that if I don't give our employees room to grow or even make mistakes, that the company won't grow, because I am only going to allow it to get as big as what I can handle. Whereas if I give them some room and let them make mistakes, they might make a mistake, but they won't make it again, because I let them make the decision. Some of the greatest advice I got, as Gerald, my dad passed away, and Gerald was running our business. I was calling him all the time. Hey, such happened. What I need to do, and he would say, just make a decision, and he'd hang up the phone. And I was like, well, I might make the wrong one. And he was like, look, you might make the wrong decision, but you're going to learn from that, and you won't do it again. And next time it'll be flawless. And so that's kind of the way I'm trying to get our employees to go is, hey, just make the decision. If I didn't trust you, you wouldn't be here. And let them know that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you did it the way that I taught you, and that if it was a little bit wrong, don't sweat it. We're in the business of fixing landscape yards and hardscapes, which means that any mistake you make, we can fix. As long as you don't cost thousands of dollars. um, so much more laid back now would be what I call my leadership style now, and just loosen reins, letting them do their thing.
I like that, because one of the things that I've learned through doing that is that when employees make mistakes, they're more likely to learn from that than if you tell him, if you say, don't do that, don't do this. And then they say, well, I'm only doing it because I'm being told to do it. But if you give them the reins and you say, make the right decision, and they make a mistake, the feeling of a mistake is very emotional, right? We don't like to make mistakes. It's embarrassing. And so we learn the lessons better when we make mistakes. So I think when we give our employees a little bit of latitude and let them have some autonomy, I think that they appreciate that, because they say, you trust me, and I like that. And the other thing is that and then if I make a mistake, I'm going to learn from it. And the other thing is, it's not the end of the world, right? And I love what you said there, is that mistakes are learning. We yes, we make mistakes here, but it's meant for a learning experience. It's not the end of the world. We're not going to, again, unless you do something that's that's really bad for the company, right? And and you did something overtly bad, right, on purpose. But if you make honest mistakes, this is a company where we're going to forgive you and we're going to help you learn, and then you're going to get better because you've learned that emotional lesson. So I love that you have approached it that way. I like that
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to really reiterate sometimes, like, we have a lot of equipment, so it breaks a lot. Um, and it's costly, but it's going to happen, and sometimes it's unavoidable. So I have to really drill through some of the guys like, hey, if you break something, just let me know. Because if it's broken and you don't tell me, the next day we start out work and I go, we'll go get such and such piece of equipment and it's broke. So now we're behind. But if you
Yeah.
tell me, it's like, all right, it broke. It is what it is. Tell me how it happened, and I'll try to explain to you. Maybe this won't happen again, or hey, it's just a total accident. Let's get it fixed, and we'll go on with the day. Um, Obviously, as a business, we know there's a certain percentage of equipment that we're going to have to repair unexplainable. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Machinery fails. It's man made. It's not going to last forever.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that because I think the idea of having having some level of grace, and also like you're not going to bite their head off with when there's bad news. In fact, you're saying, and I tell my employees that too, is like don't spin it when it comes to me. Like I need the honest truth, good, bad, and ugly. Give it to me straight, because if you hide something, like you said, it's going to affect the next day, so it's doubly as bad, right? So just give me the news, bad, good news and bad news. And I think partly how we deal with how we react to bad news sets a precedent too. If we freak out every time someone tells us something broke, guess what's going to happen? No one's going to tell us when things break. So it's how we approach bad news that can really it sets the precedent, right? So if you're always flying off the handle when anything happens, then they're going to stop telling you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson that I learned in the trenches. It's one that used to be I used to be that guy, and I realized very quickly, like, all right, that was not the way to handle that situation. Definitely should have handled it much more calmer and just assessed it and come up with a plan to fix it, because just chewing everybody's head off wasn't going to make us any progress moving forward.
Yeah, right. And then of course, if you're a hothead, everyone working for you becomes a hothead, and then you got all sorts of things that can happen
Yep,
in the
that's right.
field. So, I mean, explain to our listeners what it's like to run a company like yours. You're trying to build the greatest landscaping company in Eastern North Carolina. What does that take? What's your day like? Help us understand like what it's like to not only handle what's happening in the field, but the sales side of it, the financial side of it, and all that. What's it like? What are the pressures like for you? How do you handle all of that?
Every day's Monday. Um, the mornings are always stressful. You've got guys standing around, and you know, as a like business owner, you when you see people not moving, you see dollar signs adding up and nothing coming in. So you have to like realize, all right, I have to take a few minutes to explain today's plan, because if I take 5 minutes now, I'll save an hour later. And if I don't do that, then we're going to start costing money down the road, because no one knows what they're expected to do that day. Um, we have maintenance contracts, so we have guys that do nothing but grass cutting. Those guys are pretty much, you come in Monday through Thursday. We work 4 10s, and you get your route sheet. And unless something changes or deviates, there's no notes on that. It's, hey, you take the same people that you always have, unless they're sick. You get in your truck and you go take care of these properties. And the crew leaders have been taking care of a lot of these properties for numerous years, some of them 20 plus years. So it's a pretty routine thing for them. On our landscaping side, where we do the installs and the hardscapes, everything is different. There's no two jobs that are the same. And that's everything that we do. They may have some of the same design features, or like a French drain needs to be installed a certain way. However, on that particular job, they're going to be different. So every day is, how are we going to get the materials to the job? Because if we don't have the materials there, we can't do the work. So it's always stressful trying to get the deliveries lined up with the equipment being on site. Not too many employees on site when you don't need them. Do I start another job before this one's finished? How much money do I have out there on this one, and when am I going to be able to finish it to get it back? So it's a lot of juggling, and you really have to compartmentalize yourself. You know, when you're at work, and really focus on like individual tasks and like kind of check them off and go, all right, that's done. Nothing else I can do there. Let's go to the next one. Because if you sit there and you kind of waller in it and you don't compartmentalize and you don't explain to your guys what you're doing, you end up just looking like a circus and you're running around with your head cut off and your guys don't know what to do and you're getting mad because they're not moving. And so you really have to just explain in the morning what you're expecting to be done and take that few minutes to make everything make sense. And if you don't have that, then it's a circus, and I have been in that circus. And I try to avoid it.
You know, it's interesting because I run my own business and I'm over in Wilson. I have a manufacturing company, and but I that anxiety you feel in the mornings, I feel it too when I walk in. Everyone's standing around. It's like, you know, it's like you want to yell like get to work, you know, but
Yeah,
because it's money wasted. But you're also like, you also want to make sure that everyone knows what to do that day. You know, make sure the priorities are straight and everyone's clear. If you take that, like you said, you take that time now, a few minutes now saves hours in the future for doing rework or doing something they weren't supposed to do. So we do have a stand-up meeting every day where we sort of like, all right, what's the plan for today? What shipments are coming in? What shipments have to go out? And I think once we get everybody on the same page, then it's like, all right, let's go, you know. But I think but that anxiety, I know exactly that feeling when everyone's standing around and like I'm like, why are we standing around? Like you just feel like we're wasting money, and I think that definitely that anxiety as an entrepreneur is very very high. You know, it sounds when people hear your story, they might say, well, it sounds really stressful. Every day is a Monday. There's all these jobs, everything can go wrong. Equipment breaks down. You got people issues. Let me ask you, do you love what you do?
so I absolutely love what I do. There has been days and weeks and even months where I questioned it, like, why am I doing this? I shouldn't even run this business. I should just go work for someone else. But at the end of the day, you know, you come home and you go, you start looking through your photos of jobs you've done and you go, well, I did that. You know, like that's something that I did. And I take pride in knowing that I built it. And so it kind of like boosts your esteem back up and makes you ready for the next day. Um, Usually some days go by, you know, 10 o'clock hits and you start going, all right, everything's running smooth today. And like, I'm starting to see some progress. And so like you start feeling good. And so it makes when something goes bad, makes it a little more bearable and makes it makes it worth it. And also, sometimes the anxiety is like fuel.
Mhm.
It kind of amps you up, and when things are going crazy, and you can kind of slow things down. And I like to think of like the Matrix, the movie The Matrix. You know, you can slow things down that are going super fast, and you don't know how it's going to be stopped or it's going to fail, and you go, all right, let's stop it. You go do this, you go do this, and then you start seeing it make progress, and you go, all right, that made it all worth it. You know, the feeling that you get by doing that is definitely satisfying and makes everything worth it.
It's interesting. you know, I always say that, you know, starting a business is not, or, you know, or being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. You know, I always say the highs are higher and the lows are lower, you know, and it just seems like some days you're on a roller coaster ride and in the same day when everything is going great, something goes really bad. And so it's almost like every day something bad's going to happen. So if nothing bad happens in a day, you're like, well, that's a perfect day, right? When nothing bad happens, but it's addictive. And I think what you say is similar to me, which is it's there's an adrenaline, there's excitement, there's you know, it's really difficult to do and to get it all, you know, working right and have a victory at the end of the day. You know, you finish a great, you know, a great project and it's amazing and it just feels so good. You know, when you ship for us, when we build a product, we ship and the customer is super happy about it. It's like there's no greater feeling in the world. So you just, you know, you keep going after that. It's I've been in manufacturing for 30 years and it's like I don't think I could ever leave because of the energy that I get in doing this job. It's really difficult, but when you win, it just feels so good, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And used to, it was always like the satisfaction that I got because I personally did it. Now
Mm.
because like I'm loosening the reins. I'm letting my employees do more of the work. I'm showing them some of the real peculiar stuff that we do on hardscapes, and I'm like I'm letting them do it. And the whole time I'm going, oh, I hope that turns out right, and I'm kind of stressing myself out. But when I come back to the job, I'm going, man, they killed that. And so
Mm.
like it's satisfying knowing that they did a really good job, and then you see them get like amped up about it, and they're walking around and they're taking pictures of their work. It's like, all right, now I'm satisfied because I'm looking at them grow. So that's another thing that has really over the past year has really come to me as being adrenaline for the business.
Well, and I've seen pictures of your work, by the way, through Zach, and you do some amazing, beautiful work. So you ought to be very proud of what you do. So it's phenomenal. I wish you were over in my side of North Carolina because I'd have you do some work in my house. So it's great stuff you do. So um, what advice would you give to new leaders? Maybe someone's listening in, they've just kind of got promoted. Maybe they're young like you. What would that like you were when you took over? What would be some advice that you would give them?
If you're young and you're struggling with customers respecting you, don't doubt yourself.
Hmm.
You have to know that, hey, I know what I'm doing, I know my worth, and I know that what I'm presenting to that customer is what needs to be done. Because either you learned it at school or you learned it, through trial and error, or you learned it in a hands-on experience where someone showed you. If you know that what you're doing is right and the customer is just questioning it because you're young, don't let that get to you. I have memorable moments where I had customers ask me during a presentation, how old did you say you were? And at the time I was 18, 19 years old. And I'm the whole time I'm going, they're not hiring me because I'm young. And that really stuck with me. And I was like, and I kind of like went in a slump for a little while, but I realized, you know what? That was on them, not on me. And so on the customer side, that's one thing that I would recommend that you do is just understand that you are successful and that you are doing what you're supposed to do. They just don't appreciate you because you're young. And sometimes I feel like it's hard to do, but that's one thing I learned at a young age that I had to just let that slide and realize I couldn't please everyone.
Yeah.
On the employee side, I would just recommend you talk with your employees. After all, they're the ones that come in every day and do what you ask them. Be understanding if they've got a soccer game coming up with their kid. You know, I understand you got tight schedules, but you need to try to work with them and let them go to the soccer game, the baseball game. If they've got other things that are coming up and they need to travel, um, you need to try to let them go because if they can't do the things that they enjoy, they're not going to come here and work for you. Um, Obviously, you have to kind of draw the line in there and see where too much rope's too much rope. But every business is going to have a different amount of rope that they can lend out. So you have to figure that out for yourself because it's your business. It's not my business. It's not anyone else's. It's your business. So you have to figure out where you want to draw that line and figure out your own little style. But I do think that understanding your employees is very crucial because if you don't understand them, you don't know how to lead them. So it's pretty important. And you're friends with Zach, um, so you'll understand this. But Zach has an infectious personality.
He does.
When I hired him as an employee, he told me straightforward he had no experience landscaping, and I hired him because I realized that I needed Zach for me. um, and for a whole year, I wanted to be better because I had an employee that I thought was worthy of running our business. He didn't have the experience, but I was like, I've got an employee here that I want to impress, that I want to show that I'm the leader he thinks I am. And so when he brought this up to you, I had to really ask myself, like, for someone to say that I'm a best leader he's ever worked for, best boss he's ever had, it really hit me hard. And I realized, all right, to be the best boss, I have to be the best person for me, and I have to understand people. And I think that if everyone understands who they have working for them, then they can move forward day to day, and they'll have smooth operations.
I love that. And you know, and again, it's the idea that, I mean, hire people that are great, and it's going to push you to be a better leader. Some bosses won't hire anyone that's super competent because they're afraid of their own incompetence, right? And so I think you're right. And when we hire amazing people, it pushes us to be better, right? Because we want to be the boss that we hope that they will see in us, right? And so I think it elevates our leadership, and we have people that are, you know, fantastic contributors to our organization, and we want them to see us as great bosses too. So I think it does push us, and I think that's a key lesson there too, is that, you know, hire really great people, and it's going to make you better too.
That's right. I mean, your employees go home, they wear shirts with your logos on them. They go grocery shopping, and people ask them where they work. You know, if they're having a bad time at work, they're not gonna be like, "Oh, I work for Landscaping Unlimited, but don't hire them because he's a terrible boss." So, you know, you don't need to put on a persona of oh, I'm the greatest, because you don't need to do that. You just need to be you. And if you be you, then all the good will come out through that. And just let your employees do all the enjoyment. Let them have enjoyment. Give them some sense of pride in what they do, and you'll see your business grow in ways you never thought it could. All because you let them be them.
Such powerful advice, Shay. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey and what you've done in leadership. And obviously, you know, Zach speaks highly of you, which says a lot, because I have a hell of a lot of respect for that guy. And so for him to say, you know, that about you, I definitely want to have you on the show and hear about your story. How can our listeners find out more about you and your company?
Mainly find us on Facebook. Uh, our name's Landscaping Unlimited Incorporated. And if you find us on Facebook, it's got a sign that says Landscaping Unlimited on it. You can find me in the friends thing, and you know you're correct. Message us on Facebook. We will respond back to you, and we would love to talk anything landscaping. Even if it's not us coming to do work for you, you just want some advice or anything, we'd be happy to respond to you. Also, you can email me. My email address is shaybrick1@gmail.com, and I'll respond back to you that way. And if we want to, we can exchange phone numbers and we can go from there. But Facebook and email will be the best way to get up with us, and we'll do some talking.
Fantastic. We'll put links in the show notes for all of Shay's resources. And if you're in Eastern North Carolina, you want to hire these guys. They do really amazing work, and I'm not kidding about it. I've seen the work that you guys have done, and it's phenomenal. It's world class, and so especially if you're in the Eastern North Carolina region, give these guys a call. You're going to be very happy you did, because they're led by Shay, who's doing a really good job. And a lot of the lessons that Shay has learned, it's interesting to how the parallels in his story and what I learned through my leadership journey as well. It's all about the people. Leadership is a people business. Shay has confirmed this in this discussion, and he's leading his business well. His business is successful. It's because he's putting people first. Shay, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your journey, sharing your story. And I think it's helped us all learn about how we can become better leaders in our businesses as well. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Well, thanks again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.